Hello everyone, my name is Florent. In this video I'm going to give you 5 secrets that will help you be more accurate and more expressive in your drawings. These 5 principles work as a foundation to any drawing technique, whether the artist is conscious about it or not. I'll use this demonstration to unveil these secrets and show you how they apply. This portrait demonstration was done with charcoal and white chalk on toned paper. You'll find the list of the material used in the description box if you're interested. Without further ado, let's reveal these 5 essential drawing principles. 1. Establish dynamic lines. In any subject, there is a line of action, a line that seems to capture the movement of the person or the essence of the thing itself. In the blocking stage, at the very beginning of my drawing, I start by establishing the main lines with a soft piece of charcoal. I try to find the lines that convey the emotion that I'm trying to express with this pose. It's important to give enough consideration to these first few lines, because the rest of the drawing depends on it. You have to aim for expressivity before you start thinking about accuracy. The first couple of lines don't have to be perfectly placed. What matters is that they display the level of clarity or harmony that you're looking for. You have to feel that these lines convey the liveliness of the entire drawing. Avoid working on a single part too early in the drawing. This could make you forget about the coherence of the entire subject. During this stage, very early in the process, don't check for proportions, not yet. Make sure that the overall composition is harmonious first. Right here I'm tracing the diagonals and the midline to make sure that the center of focus is where I want it to be. Find the main angles. Which lines are dominant? Which lines are supposed to guide the eyes of the viewer? The harmony of the pose is essential. It's better to capture it entirely. The composition has to follow the energy of the subject, not the other way around. In this drawing, I kept the angle as wide as possible for a long time to make sure that the gesture was right. So I drew the arms and the entire hair, but in the end I decided to crop it and I chose a different type of framing. One last thing, as I said earlier, these lines are not supposed to be perfectly placed, and you'll probably find out later that they need to be moved or changed to adjust to the proportions. But it's okay because the energy these first few marks bring will spread into the additional lines you'll add later on, and so you'll be able to start working on the proportions without losing their original dynamism. The second principle has to do with proportions. The secret is to simplify the shapes and keep the subject geometric for as long as possible. The real object you see in front of you has no real edges, and lines are just a creation of your imagination. So the reality of the visible world is that lights and shadows intermingle with each other constantly. There is an infinite variety of complex forms inhabiting the three-dimensional world, and you need to simplify that. The secret is to turn the 3 dimensions your eyes perceive into a juxtaposition of flat geometric shapes. Simplify by delineating the shadow shapes, and try to turn the form into flat objects. Keep things geometric. What I mean by geometric is that you want to avoid tracing curves for as long as possible. It's much harder to get an accurate curve than a series of straight lines. You have to work step by step and start drawing curves when you're sure that the straight lines are accurate enough. Like a sculpture, start with very broad planes at first, and then slowly cut the angles and refine the lines little by little. I work step by step, and I start drawing curves when I'm sure that the straight lines respect the proportions. You have to understand this concept first. Your drawing needs to start simple and go towards more and more complexity as you progress. If you try to do the shading and work on the three-dimensional aspects of the drawing too early, it can easily throw you off and disrupt your representation of the proportions. The next secret is to find visual landmarks that help you navigate through the project. The reality of the object or the person you want to draw is infinitely complex, so it is absolutely necessary to find things that can be easily grasped. In this drawing, my main visual landmarks are the center point of the surface, the left eyebrow, the ridge of the nose, and the bottom line of the chin. These key points are elements that I consider easy enough to locate. I choose the elements I can be certain about, and I rely on them to locate the rest of the features of the portrait. These visual landmarks depend on the subject. They also depend on your strategy going into the drawing. Choose noteworthy points that you think you can draw with confidence. It's always interesting to look for acute angles and sharp edges. Relate the rest of the shapes to these landmarks and try to articulate everything. The opposite strategy is to keep some lines flexible. Keep a side of the drawing open so that you can adjust it to have the right proportions. Your visual landmarks aren't supposed to move, but the flexible parts can be moved or modified as the drawing progresses. In this drawing, the parts I keep flexible are the hands, the left part of the head, and the neck. It seems trivial, but knowing exactly what is a visual landmark and what is a flexible part can really help you build more confidence and represent the proportions with more accuracy. You can see that I keep the eyes flexible in this drawing. I take my time before I start drawing the eyes. There's no rush, and it's the part of the drawing I really want to bring focus on. So in this case, using the eyes as visual landmarks is risky. It's better to wait and make sure that the entire portrait is coherent before drawing the eyes. So right now I keep the eyes blurry. I refine everything first and make sure everything works before I start drawing the eyes. Now that we've talked about expressivity and proportion, it's time to talk about values and shading. The secret to representing lights and shadows in a drawing is to understand the surface. I try to avoid blending with my fingers and do everything with my charcoal slowly. The paper I use has a lot of texture, so everything looks very scratchy right now when I press the stick of charcoal. I try to avoid blending with my fingers because I find that the result is very hard to control and can feel very washed out. I prefer to do everything with the charcoal. Because I don't blend with my fingers, I see the surface as a juxtaposition of peaks and valleys. When you first drag a piece of charcoal on the surface, it looks scratchy because the charcoal powder doesn't reach all the peaks and valleys evenly. Of course, you can smudge everything with a stomp or with your fingers, but it can make it hard to control the values in the drawing. The difference can be very noticeable in the end. If you want more accuracy and control, you cannot just blend everything out. Achieving a smooth finish is all about helping the charcoal cover the surface evenly. This takes a little bit of patience and, more importantly, charcoal that can be sharpened into a very fine point. Avoid vine charcoal with a hollow core like this. It can work in the very beginning, but it's almost impossible to draw the finest details around the eyes because it's impossible to sharpen. If you know me, you know that I always use nitrum charcoal. It comes in different degrees of softness: B, which is very soft, HB, and H, which is very hard. Sharpen it with a piece of sandpaper. If the piece of charcoal becomes too small, I use a charcoal holder called the Stylus. It helps me sharpen small bits that would otherwise be too small. Plus, the length is important because it gives me more control over the pressure that my hand exerts. It's the same thing if you want to draw with graphite. You want to sharpen it into a very fine point to have more control and, as I say, fill the holes within the grain of the paper. I shape my kneaded eraser into a very fine point to remove the excess charcoals on the peaks. Then I start placing the highlights with a Conte white pencil. Now it's time to work on the eyes. This is the crucial part, so I work slowly, almost pixel by pixel in a way. The distance between the eyes and the position of the iris have to be adjusted with a lot of care and subtlety. So this is the thing I try to retake my time with. I try something, then I step back and I try to see if something looks wrong, because it doesn't take much to make a cross-eyed look, but the good thing is that it's easy to spot. Sometimes I use an old brush to remove the excess charcoal and blend very lightly. Sometimes I even use a little skewer, press lightly and slowly shape the eyes until everything feels right. The final secret is to find a focal point. Viewers need a focal point to lead their eyes throughout the picture. But how can you create that in a drawing? First, let's examine the difference between focal point and point of interest. A point of interest exists outside of the drawing. It's something that attracts attention in real life. Whereas a focal point needs the artwork and the decision of the artist to exist. For example, the eyes are a strong point of interest in any portrait, because the eyes are the first thing that we consider when we look at each other or interact with each other. But most parts of the face are also very strong points of interest. A focal point on the drawing is created by the decision of the artist to articulate the lines and values a certain way in order to bring focus onto a specific part of the artwork. It is similar in a way to the focal point a photographer can get with a camera. If your focal point is the same as your point of interest, you'll have no problem leading the viewer's eyes where you want it. In the case of the drawings that I'm doing for this demonstration, the focal point is on the eyes, so it's pretty easy. But there are some rules that can help you bring focus on any part of the drawing, whether it is a point of interest or not. In general, the part of a drawing where the lightest light and the darkest dark meet becomes a focal point. It's also a good idea to make the edges sharper on the focal points and leave the rest hazy or unfinished. Alright, that's it for this video. Of course, there's a lot more to drawing than what I just mentioned in this video. It takes a lot of time to reach excellence, and knowing a couple of principles is not enough. It requires a lot of time and hard work, but I'm sure you'll get it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and watch the rest of my videos. If you're interested in oil painting, you can also check out my last oil painting course. As always, take care and have fun drawing.